Good evening and welcome to the January 13th regular meeting of the Hillsborough Town Board of Commissioners. We're glad you're here and sorry for the delay. We had a little technology issue, but we are ready to go. Sarah, do we have any audience comments for this evening?
We do not.
Thank you. Moving on to number 3 on the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? I think there's one recommendation we add to the consent agenda, the MLK March request.
Move to add an item G for special event permit for the MLK March under consent agenda.
Don't we have another addition? No, we don't. Never mind. On the second, the amended, I'll get words out eventually.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to presentations. Eric, Employee Service Milestone Awards.
Good morning, Mayor, and good morning. Good evening, Mayor and Board. So definitely one of the my two favorite evenings of the year are tonight, and then when we do the awards, but just the milestone awards. So every 5 years, we recognize employees who've hit a 5-year milestone. We provide a small stipend so they can take themselves out to dinner or do whatever they would like. And we also provide some additional recognition via the coins and the display kits, which are really nice. So we are going to get started, and each employee that I go through, I'll make a comment or two about them. All right, our 5-year class, and what better person to start with than our awesome Commissioner English. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, appreciate it. Time flies when you're having fun.
Very good.
All right, and we've got our true leader, Jacob Good. I do not believe Jacob's here with us this evening. So Jacob started off, I believe, with our utility crews and has worked his way up into a supervisory position with Public Works. And he was part of our Western North Carolina response crews and then came back to kind of help run things here. So Jacob does a fantastic job for us, and we are lucky to have him. And Officer First Class, Andrew Jones. And one of the things that I know the chief has mentioned multiple times is Jones is a phenomenal investigator and just often talks about how lucky we are, the cases that he solved, and just does a great job of teaching everybody else in the organization investigation. So thank you, Officer Jones. And we also have water plant operator 3, and it is extremely difficult to get a grade A, which is the highest level of certification you can get in water treatment. And Lynn has had a grade A certification for quite a few years, even before she came here. So we're very fortunate to have Lynn on the team, and thank you for her 5 years for the service. And our admin support specialist, Lindsay Rue. I think probably everybody knows Lindsay. She helps Public Works, helps the community services, the planning operations, and everything else, in addition to being one of our main points of contact with the community when people have questions and need assistance. Lindsay's also providing support to all the different departments and just does a fantastic job. You'll also see her around town taking care of some of the landscapes. So she's passionate, diverse, and talented. So we're lucky to have Lindsay on the team. All right, and we've got actual in-person recipient. This is exciting. So I think everybody knows Eli Valsing. Eli started with us in the police department and provided assistance for several years, and then has moved over into HR. And I'm just always so impressed with Eli, and then she's just got knowledge when it comes to HR. There's like so many laws and policies and processes, and the employees are coming to see her all the time for help. So just wanted to say congratulations and thank you to Eli for all you do for us. Thank you very much. All right. All right, moving on to a full decade of for milestone awards. So our admin services director, Jen Della Valle, one great thing about having fellows or interns is sometimes they stay with you for a long time and become department heads and do an awesome job. So it's hard to believe it's been 10 years Janet actually worked for the town of Lake Lure, Catawba County, and the league before she came to us. So she had a lot of experience coming in here and just does a fantastic job with all the divisions that she works with. And I'm sure, I know she's watching on YouTube right now. Her kids may be watching too. So, all right, and we also have Major Simmons, Deputy Chief in the Police Department. Hard to believe it's been 10 years for him. So I think Andy has gotten notoriety over the years. He was the brains and the fingers on the keyboard behind Officer Mercy Meow and a lot of our other really
Hillsborough Rocks.
Yes, and Hillsborough Rocks. You got a good point, and a lot of the great engagement we do. So thank you, Major Simmons. Also continuing with the police department is Sergeant Spraggins, and I believe she leads our training coordinator. So she's done several jobs, has done an excellent job. And as speaking of training, she actually went to the league sponsored Slower is Faster school that they put on, which is a train the trainer program for instructors. And she did a great job behind the wheel, represented Hillsborough well last year. So thank you, Sergeant Spraggins. 15 years now. Oh, if we're getting all the police officers in line, I think everybody knows Lieutenant Chalenza. Nick has worked in all of the divisions in the police department, has done an outstanding job, has been a very impressive leader, and has also been one of the more active officers we've had in the community engagement efforts. I think he's been involved in the barbecues and the straw for dogs, and that we could go on and on and on. And he's just been a fantastic officer and leader in the Hillsborough Police Department. So thank you, Lieutenant Chalenza. All right, and our last one for this evening is Sam Donovan, 15 years. He's the operator in charge. They call it the ORC, which means he's second in charge at the water plant. Sam actually came to us and worked in public works and did a phenomenal job. If you have been to the Margaret Lane Cemetery before and seen the memorial, Sam was the architect and built that. He's a brick mason, did that many years ago, very talented, and somebody we can count on the very complex operations of running the water treatment plant and the complex things that get thrown at them all the time. So that's our the class of 2025. So thank you, everybody.
Moving on to our next presentation, we'll have Dave McCole and Robert Bittner from PB Mares to give us our our fiscal year 2023-24 audit presentation.
Getting there.
Good evening.
How are y'all doing this evening? Good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me today. As you mentioned, my name is Robbie Bittner. I'm an audit partner with PB Mares, and I am your engagement partner for the fiscal year 2024 audit. I want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for allowing us to serve the town. We do appreciate it. We do enjoy it. I get to come back to my stomping grounds a little bit, be up here around Chapel Hill in the area, so that's kind of nice. But I also want to thank Dave, Eric, and their team here. As auditors, we ask a lot of questions. We prod a lot. We can be a bit annoying at times, and they always respond with a smile, and we really do appreciate it. Not everyone does that. It actually makes the job a whole lot easier and much more enjoyable. So we really do appreciate that. I'm going to start today we've got our presentation. Let me make sure I can actually move this thing forward. And I can, oh, there it is. Oh, that's not doing it either. Nice. Well, it's all right. We can do it like this. All right. So we're just going to go through the financial audit results. I'd like to say that it was nice to only have one audit this year. It was very good. I think Dave really appreciated that. Eric probably as well, that we did not have to go through multiple, and we made it on time through the deadline just a few days prior. And happy to say one thing coming forward, that deadline has been extended now by the LGC, which will be next year's audit deadline will be December 31st. We're not going to push for that want to get it done well before that piece. But that is something that has come out recently. So go through the quick agenda, kind of spoiler alert on everything here. Go through the audit opinion. We had an unmodified opinion this year. Then we'll go through a few benchmarking items as it relates to the town compared to other, I say similar towns with quotations because it's all towns without electric systems with greater than $10 million in expenses. So their comparatives are also in there with Raleigh and Charlotte, Winston-Salem, Fayetteville, those types of places. Then we'll go through the compliance results. In addition, last year you had a state single audit. We also had a uniform guidance single audit this year for the federal awards for the ARPA funds. And also our government auditing standards report. And then the last piece, which is I'm sure everybody will be happy to see down there that there are no performance indicators of concern this year that require a response from the commissioners. So that's good news there. So as I mentioned, like I said, it's a little bit of a spoiler. As auditors, we're allowed to issue a report and our opinion on whether or not your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP. There's 4 types of opinions we can issue. As you can see them up here, we have the adverse, which is the worst, which means that nothing is fairly stated. You have a disclaimer, which means we didn't see enough to even render an opinion one way or another. You have the qualified or modified opinion. This is the opinion where everything is in line except for maybe 1 or 2 parts of the financial statements. And the highest level of assurance that we can provide as external auditors is that unmodified or clean opinion, which the town did receive this year. So starting from there, we'll go to page 1, if you would. I'm joking. We're not actually going to go through this page for page. But page 1 is the audit opinion as we go through there. So here we're show a little bit of your general fund revenues, just a comparison and breakdown of where your revenues are coming from. The biggest item here obviously is ad valorem taxes, followed up by your unrestricted intergovernmental revenues, those being sales taxes and those types of things coming through. Next, we'll see a little bit of a comparison year over year. As you can see, each of those revenues seems to be growing little by little each year. Steady growth in the general fund. This is your property tax collected, levy collected. This is a total average between both real property and personal property and vehicles. Just recall that vehicles is 100% collection all the time because the state collects it, or you can't drive your car or get it inspected. So as you can see, it's a little bit of a dip from the previous year in 2023. Not enough really to show much there. As it compared to statewide, note that these numbers are from 23, and a lot of these comparisons, if we're looking at statewide or similar size, since those information for 24 has not been released yet. You can see you're right in line with similar size as well as better than average for statewide. Here is your general fund expenditures, public safety making up nearly 50%. This is very common in municipalities. Public safety is going to be one of the largest. And then transportation, a lot of times will be a large piece depending on whether or not you run a large transportation system or have a smaller one. And then general government follows through. Public safety, though, always reigns supreme because that's your fire, rescue, as well as your police. Also, if you have any questions through the course of this, please feel free to stop me. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, or at least attempt to. So here you can see your expenditure growth by category. Public safety is, as you can see, still the greatest. The general government there falling off a little bit compared to the previous years. That's primarily due to some grant money. And then here's your fund balance. This is the important one. Where's your fund balance? What do you have in reserve? So as you can see here, the general fund balance grew from 2020 to 2023, a little bit from 23 to 24, but it is at a healthy level. And what are the breakdowns of that? So you'll see per GASB statement number 54, there are 5 categories of fund balance. There's the non-spendable, which is your prepaids or things that maybe you have loans outstanding that are loaned to someone that it's not available to spend. Inventories also fall into that. You have restricted, you have committed. Restricted is third party, externally restricted. Committed is committed by council. by the commissioners. And then the last one is assigned, which is assigned by management. And then the final piece is the unassigned or available to appropriate fund balance. So as you can see there, that's the largest portion. Stabilized by state statute here is a required formula. Basically says that you can't overexpend what you have in receivables outstanding. So it's just a simple formula from general statutes. All right, any questions on the financial statements? Thing there. All right, moving on to compliance. Everybody loves compliance. So in addition to our report on the financial statements, in accordance with government auditing standards, we're required to issue a report on your compliance with laws, regulations, grants, contracts, as well as identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control that we see over the preparation of financial statements during the course of our audit. As you can see here, we also issued our report on the whether or not we believe that you're in compliance with your federal grants under the uniform guidance. And we also there would present any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control over that compliance. And then also for the state single audit act, the same thing as the federal, just for your state grants, which for this year, we tested the ARPA fund for the federal and the PAL bill funds for the state. Good news, we did not have any items that we considered reportable non-compliance and did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls as it relates to the financial statements. We had an unmodified opinion on your federal grant compliance in accordance with uniform guidance and did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control related to that compliance. And following up with that same theme here, we had an unmodified opinion on your compliance with the state grants, as well as did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control. Overall, that means that we had a very clean audit this year. So all across the board. So kudos to the team here for that. The last piece, the last major piece we're going to go through, this is our AUC 260. You have a copy of this letter. This is formally Statement of Auditing Standards number 114. It's been updated several times since then. These are required communications from the auditor to those charged with governance about the certain things that may have happened or didn't happen during the course of an audit. I'm not going to read through each and every one of these things unless you would like me to. But I just want to hit some of the major points. There were no major accounting policy changes this year. There were some new GASBs that were implemented, but none of them had a material effect on the financial statements at the town. We agreed with the significant accounting policies, excuse me. We did not have any significant or unusual transactions, and we also agreed with management's judgments as it relates to estimates. As it relates to estimates as well, in your actual letter, there is an attachment there that shows the significant estimates that management uses during the preparation of financial statements. Some of those simply being compensated absences, useful life of capital assets, OPEB valuation, which is provided by a actuary, as well as the valuation of the Elders liability that comes from the state of North Carolina. So from here, we did not have any audit adjustments this year, so that's a big one there. So no audit adjustments. We do have a few uncorrected misstatements that are from here. These items are not errors in the current year. These are rollovers from the previous year that were uncorrected in the prior year that was reported to you previously. This is just the reversal and correction of those. So at the end of fiscal year 2024, your fund balance and or net position is 100 is accurate. So there are no uncorrected misstatements outstanding at this point. So we did not have any disagreements with management. We are aware that you do contract with another firm to help prepare the financial statements and close out things at the very end of the year. And we did not have any significant difficulties dealing with that. So like I said, you have a copy of this here. Also attached to that letter are significant communications that we had. Those include the management's representation letter where management's representing to us that they have been truthful, factual, and complete in the information provided, as well as a management letter related to one minor item as it relates to Powellville. So nothing of significance there. The last piece in the presentation here are the financial performance indicators of concern. As I mentioned, kind of again in the agenda, spoiler alert, there are no performance indicators of concern, but these are items that are required to be presented by the local government commission. When we prepare the data input form for submission of the audit report to the local government commission, there is a tab that's called performance indicators that we are required to print out and provide to the council, to the commissioners here. So these next few items, we're just going to go through and you'll see if they were highlighted red, they would indicate that there was a performance indicator that had to be answered. So first one is your general fund balance available. You can see where the state's thresholds are at 25%. This one is going to look a little out of whack, and that is because of the reclassification of restricted cash. So in the water sewer fund, previously, a lot of the dollars that were listed as restricted cash for future projects are not truly third-party restricted. So when you actually are from the definition of restricted cash is third-party restriction. So since there was not a third party, those were reclassified this year, elevating this ratio. But it's still a good ratio. The cash is still there. It's just whether or not it's in line cash and cash equivalents or restricted cash and cash equivalents. So from here, you can see the transfers for the water fund. Again, there's no issues here that the state feels like you need to respond to. Your general performance indicators, you made it on time. You collected at least 97% of your ad valorem taxes that was budgeted, and there's not an expected decrease in property value. Last piece here, you have a finance officer. Again, these are all items that are just listed out here. You have a finance officer, and you did not have any issues with bond covenants. So with that, I'll mention a few other items that are not on here, just things to be looking for to be upcoming in the next few years. GASB statements 101 and 102 will be effective for fiscal year 25. 101 brings on a portion of the sick leave balance at the town. So the portion of outstanding sick leave that is expected to be paid out in cash at some point through leave has to be brought on. And then GASB statement 102 is just some additional disclosures around risk and concentration of risk. Statements 103 and 104 have also been issued. They are just 103 is just some simple updates to the reporting model, and we'll change your MD&A just ever so slightly. Same thing with 104. It's just a few updates out there. So just some things to be aware of. And as I mentioned previously, it came in early and they called it a Christmas gift that the LGC is now extending the deadline for next year's audit to December, but I find that more of a curse than a deadline. It was kind of hoping to be the 15th.
Can you remind us, what was the deadline?
The new deadline will be December 31st, 2025. It was previously October 31st with an automatic 30-day grace period to November 30th to be submitted by December 1.
Is that in part response to the kind of the shortage of qualified accountants to work in this area?
It's a function of that, as well as the reporting models becoming more and more complex. As these new GASB statements come out, there's more and more out there. These smaller units are really having a hard time keeping up, as well as the yellow book standards keep getting tighter and tighter for us auditors. We're getting to the point, I would imagine, in the next issuance of the yellow book, there's a very good chance that we will not be allowed to assist in the drafting of financial statements anymore, which has pushed that, along with the CPE requirements of the yellow book, has pushed a lot of smaller practitioners out of governmental accounting just because of the expense as it relates to having to do all the CPE as well as having external reviewers and having other folks come in and do things. So
Is there a way to, I understand conceptually why Yellow Book is going in that direction, but is there any feedback mechanism that brings in just elements of pragmatism and, you know,
so every time that they do issue almost like a white paper out with the proposed and you can give comments. I'm not really sure how much weight the comments are given. But typically how this has gone is over the past 10 to 12 years at least, is anytime the PCAOB, the Public Companies Accounting Board, tightens anything up, it's only a matter of time before the Yellow Book and the GAO tightens theirs up behind it. And then so right behind them would be the AICPA. So when you're looking at independence and rules, it's PCAOB is the highest. Then you have the government auditing standards for the Yellow Book, and then you have the AICPA, which when we perform regular audits, we are under the AICPA guys. But with most governmental units, we're under the Yellow Book. So, but yes, there is a mechanism, but it's.
because at some point, because it's such, if there are no bodies to do the work. And there are places and, we're fortunate that we have more resources available than some of the smaller towns that they don't. They don't have the general fund, they don't have the bodies.
Well, some of that, I can speak to this. I am on the Government Auditing and Accounting Committee with the ACPA. And the state is moving for smaller units that spend $10 million or less to potentially a new reporting model that takes away a lot of the GASB requirements of the last 10 years that have resulted in such a backup of getting things done. There's also potential to change the state law on where a Yellow Book audit is required. Because as it sits now, if you spend more than $100,000 in state or federal funds combined, the state requires that Yellow Book audit. So
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We want to release you to the other things you have to do this evening. Eric, staff, Dave, any comments, questions?
Just a major thanks to Robbie and his firm, and of course to Dave and his team. It's a tremendous amount of work, and we've come a long way in a short time. So thanks to all of everybody pitched in.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Mr.
the
Mayor.
work
Thank you.
and the work that you do for us. Okay, moving on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to approve as presented,
As amended.
as amended, I'm sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Matt. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're on to our regular agenda. And our first topic is an unusual topic. Turkey vultures. The problem on West Queen Street and other places.
Were we able to get a hold of US Fish and Wildlife? Okay.
Awesome. Awesome.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Well, yeah, if you could, let me, hang on one second, please.
Mhm.
Okay, and are you Michael?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Please speak into the microphone and of course, we are very familiar with this problem and have heard this perspective from several people. So we appreciate you coming to the board to present your information.
Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Mike Beanland. My wife and I moved to Hillsborough in 2016. We moved downtown in 2020. Since then, I've had two girls, and we lived downtown ever since. When we moved downtown, we looked at the house, loved the house. There were no turkey vultures at the house. And then shortly after we moved in, we noticed that the birds started congregating and growing ever more. So we decided to talk to the neighbor, and he notified us that they're migratory birds and they should be moving on shortly. So don't worry about it, and just put your mind at ease. So We took our time. The birds never went away. They often, we have a large pecan tree in the front of our house. They often congregate in the tree. And then, we have a nice concrete sidewalk coming up to our house, and there's so much excrement that you can't even see the concrete anymore. It's all white from the excrement. And, we have two small kids that play in the yard too. Rain's the only thing that cleans it up. And so we're pretty frustrated with, the amount of birds. And so, oftentimes there's property damage. They land on the roof, they destroy shingles. Their talons are pretty sharp, so they land on the roof, roost on the roof, can destroy shingles. There's little meat trays, so the supermarket trays that you get. We often find those in our yard, as the birds eat the meat from next door and then bring the trays over into our yard and leave the trays throughout the yard. We see bones too. Our dog will often come back with bones. So if you're familiar with like a T-bone steak, we'll see those bones all throughout the yard, chicken bones, things like that. Things that, we don't want our dog and our pets and our children coming in contact with. So we've had multiple conversations with the neighbor. I wouldn't bring this here if we hadn't already had the conversation. I think it's a duty to us as community members to have the conversation first. And so we've had the conversation. Sent multiple emails, and really, I think there was a tipping point about 2 years ago. There was a bird flu epidemic. I think it was the summer of 2022, where there were basically vultures dying across our property, his property, and neighbors' properties. And I personally had to pick up about 6 to 10 dead vultures, put them in the trash, as they were just dying in the yard. And so at that point, we contacted them again. It's like, okay, like if this isn't the point where you realize that feeding these birds and having them congregate in large unnatural numbers is kind of an unsafe, unnatural thing, this has to change behavior. And for a time there was, and that's kind of been the pattern. As we address it, we see a decrease in birds, and then within weeks the birds come back. And so that's kind of why we're here today. Is we feel like we've addressed it enough, I think we were asking the town and you all to help us out. I'm not sure what the right resolution is, but we'd appreciate some resolution in the matter. It's been frustrating. We love our neighbors and we want what's best. But at the same time, I think there's some community standards we need to adhere to. So I appreciate your time. Thank you all for hearing me. And we look forward to the resolution on this one. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, don't go far, because I think, Matt, are you prepared to answer additional questions, or Eric, or is that you?
Me and Stephanie can
Stephanie.
tag team, answering questions that you may have. I will say, in advance of tonight's meeting, the biggest thing that we have working right now is we have a wildlife resource guide that the town's been preparing, kind of comprehensively, to address the deer problem, the vulture problem, that Stephanie's been working on. That, will be ready soon. It's in, final draft format. And we are researching other communities' ordinances on prohibition of feeding animals on private property. Currently, we have not found any example ordinances of the state that specifically prohibit feeding of birds or vultures specifically. They're exempted from a lot of the ordinances we found to go by. And so we're still sort of trying to figure out that enforcement mechanism, if that's some way the board wants to go. And we have not made contact with Fish and Wildlife unless Stephanie's something new to report.
I've just done some research. I don't know how much you want to hear about that, but
Well, I mean, all I know is,
Kathleen,
okay.
one second. Is there anything, Stephanie, you'd like to add?
sure. Yeah, it's been. I'm gonna wear bird shirts tonight. Yeah, in solidarity. A couple of things that I have learned since you guys sent me on this path, which is not my, educational background or area of expertise. So please understand that I'm learning along, I think probably with all of us. So the vultures that we have congregating downtown are black vultures, not turkey vultures. So that, forgive me for not knowing that before. Some people have referred to them as buzzards. They're not, that's a misnomer. So to clear up the record, black vultures and turkey vultures are both native in North Carolina, and both contribute a really important role to the overall ecology and ecosystem, as you can imagine. And they're both federally protected in all the same rules, but the turkey vultures have sort of a bare looking red head, and they're the larger birds that a lot of times you see out along county roads. Whereas the black vultures are the ones that you guys are familiar with at the police department and some of West Queen Street and West Tryon Street. So there, you know, there's some best practices that we're gonna be highlighting in the wildlife resource guide. The number one thing is don't feed any of the animals that are causing problems. But one of the issues with assigning a wildlife management plan to your sustainability director is that I started to do a lot of research and look into, you know, the species like groundhogs and squirrels and deer and Canada geese and vultures, realizing they're not actually overpopulated here. The overpopulated species is humans, in my opinion, and the way that we live and the way that we develop and, you know, the way that we've kind of cut up and fragmented habitat leads to crowding, and crowding leads to things like disease and safety hazards and some of the things. So we also are including that type of information. The beneficial aspects for each of these species will be in the wildlife guide, as well as the best practices for reducing human and animal conflicts, which really has to do with like changing how we live and what we do. But the number one suggestion would be not to feed wildlife, because if you want to feed wildlife, the best thing to do is to plant native plants and to let them sort of come and go, and then to also work on the things that we're doing in our sustainability plan, like reconnecting, you know, areas of conservation so that the animals can migrate and move as they're just trying to survive. So I guess that's all I really want to add. I did reach out to Ken Ostrand, who was named in the agenda item, and he told me that he is not feeding the vultures as of the week before Christmas. And he doesn't plan to go back to it. And he hopes that that means that the numbers will, you know, dwindle as the birds do not have food in his yard. That's just information that he shared with me via email.
I'd like to ask one basic question, then I'm gonna go around the table to see what questions that we might have. And my one question is the, because the Ostrands and their former residents had this, we've been through this before, in a different location. And my question is the feeding of the vultures responsible for the multiple populations, or is this just one large population of vultures down, do you think?
Well, they've moved around. I don't know if it's the same group. I can't tell the difference, but there's a group that's closer to the Hillsborough Police Department. They love the police officers. They love their cars, especially, and the roof of the building. So that group that's downtown, in the Central Commercial District, I think was looking for scraps from the dumpster areas and the recycling and trash units. We have in the past 3 months hired a contractor to come in once a month and pressure wash and clean the dumpster areas. So we've also gone through all kinds of things. Rod Jones has tried really whirly gigs, mirrors, sticky, tacky stuff on the roof. I mean, we're trying sort of everything we can within the federal regulations, because you're not allowed to injure or harass or harm or relocate or kill a federally protected species. But we continue to work on the ones that have been attacking the police department. I think that the group on West Queen Street is a different group. I don't think it's going back and forth, but I don't actually know.
Are they all the same species?
They're all black vultures, yeah. And I think what happens is when a food source pops up, some continue, you know, conglomerate around that food source. And so the trick is really cutting down on the amount of food that's available to them in the urban area.
Great. Thank you. So, Matt, can we start with you? Do you have any questions, follow-up questions you want to ask?
No follow-up questions. You know, it's an issue I've heard about, and I think we've all heard about for several years. Never had it on my bingo card for service on the town board. But while I'm very heartened that Mr. Ostrand has said that he will refrain from feeding, I know that staff has bandied around various ideas about regulation, particularly in, you know, don't do X, Y, and Z, so we can point to a rule book and say, hey, you know, don't do wildlife, which might also apply to some folks feeding deer in town. But I would still like, you know, some sort of ordinance where we can, you know, point to, just like folks with dogs and leashes, to really, you know, discourage feeding wildlife. Because it's not good for them and it's really not good for us either, so, but I'm glad, at least as of a few weeks ago, it may have resolved itself, but I think some sort of ordinance language would still be needed.
Thank you, Matt. Rob?
I don't really have any questions, sorry you have to live with this, because I'm sure it's not a fun thing to live with. And I believe, in your notes, you have noticed when your neighbor has not been there for a while that they seem to get less.
I would say, you know, he went on a 2-week vacation, once notified us, you know, watched the house, things like that. The birds completely disappeared. Like within 2 or 3 days, there were 0 birds. And I didn't notice at the time, or I didn't go by the police station or by the dumpsters to see if they kind of correlated. I might from here on out, but to an earlier point where Ken said he stopped feeding, I would say, to clarify, I saw that email. He has reduced feeding and now he only feeds 1 bird that he believes has a damaged wing. And so, to the point, right, that it's not that I stop, it's I'll cut back or I'll reduce. And that's the frustrating part.
That was my other question, is if you've noticed anything kind of before Christmas, but it sounds like you really haven't.
So since I emailed him on the 24th, and since the 24th, there has been, you know, I would say the birds fluctuate in population from 50 to 100 in his yard. There's probably down to 12 to 15 in his yard now.
And I have actually also been going by every day since I knew this item was coming, and I agree that I mean, even before tonight's meeting, there were 10 birds at the house. And I also drive by the police department to see if it's the same pop. And there's birds in both of those locations, although there are less birds at the police department than there were before we started cleaning. So I do think that cleaning and not leaving food scraps out and reducing that kind of fast food style restaurant, you know, means that they're gonna go other places to look for food.
I don't have any questions. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. I just have one other follow-up question. It is, and I don't recall if this was in conversation or by email, but there was one other municipality in North Carolina that recently got a permit to cull vultures because of a problem. I don't know the origin of that problem or anything like that, but has that been investigated at all at this point? Is that something that we could do as a last resort?
Yeah, I mean, Matt and I have talked about it. If directed by the board, we could investigate what would go into applying for a federal depredation permit, but that's not something that we've done before, and it would probably take some staff time to learn how extensive that process is.
Thank you. And I'll just add one other piece of context, and that is when I came on the board 10 years ago, that was one of the very first issues that came up, was vultures, and it was a particular woman's yard, and that's when I learned that it's a protected species and we couldn't do anything about that. So it's been all the 9 or 10 years that we've had that problem. Megan.
Excuse me. I don't have any specific questions. I think the emails that we've gotten show a lot of the issue that we have of trying to enforce anything, being protective in that. But to Matt's point, something on the books to say, don't feed the animals, may have a little bit more weight behind it. It's something that I would definitely, I would say that to have the town like maybe look into some language to have that written. That's all really have to add.
Thank you. Kathleen?
Yeah, and it's Rollsville, and I've had long conversations, I've had more conversations with Ronnie Curran, who's the mayor of Rollsville. It's once a year, and it's a restricted number of birds that can be killed. It's it's easy and hard at the same time, meaning the request goes in and then it's behind the scenes with, US Fish and Wildlife. But the other thing is, I was also, well, one of the useful things with in Alabama, talking to a small town that also has, vulture issues, mainly because it's surrounded with farmland and, dead cows and things like that, but metal roofs, they're not seeing the damage, but I don't know the cost implications. And I would historic district, I'm not even sure if that's even a possibility. But I was hearing that they were getting less damage with the metal roofs than with the asphalt roofs. I absolutely believe we need to have, no feeling of wildlife, ordinance is something that we can do. It's one thing with backyard birds, but the deer, all of the animals, it's harmful for the animals, it's harmful for the interactions. I hate hearing you're having the issue and I mean, when I'm out in the country, I love the vultures. They serve a great purpose. But what you're living with, nobody should. And, I'm hoping we can come up with, I'm hoping that the, neighborly and more communication, education that resolves as much as possible. But I do think we need to know about the USDA, Fish and Wildlife options. Again, I know that it is once a year and it's a very restricted number. It's not for 100, a flock of 100, because Rollsville only has, I think their flock is around 60 to 80. Which is bad enough for what's happening, and they have a whole neighborhood. It's not their issue. It's not that neighbors are feeding. There's just something, it's on the edge of fields, so they're having a field day with the mice, the squirrels, whatever the rodent population. They just hang out in the neighborhood. But it's a very restricted. It would not solve the issue. It would cut down a little bit. And I really appreciate the work y'all are doing.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Is that?
Yep, that's it. I'm
Thank
done.
you. Evelyn, do you have any questions or comments about the turkey
Well,
vultures? You live
I
pretty
must
close.
say that, I must use this. Some years ago, the same family lived next to me. And the heat was out. I mean, the electricity was out in my house, but not in theirs. And so they invited me over I could stay at their house. Well, that was nice until I heard all this jingle, 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 and it was ice on the ground. They had a nice spread, and people said they don't eat fruit, but they do. There was watermelon, there was cantaloupe, there was fresh food served like on a platter down below where I was sleeping. So what I was hearing, and so they didn't bother my yard, but they got the corner of Wake and Trine. And the couple who lived below, well, several houses down, that dog could not tolerate it and could not come around. So, I don't know. Well, people complained and they seemed to like pine trees, and one woman, including, well, I don't guess you would mind if I used her name, I think it was Diane Cates and Mrs. Whitty. Mrs. Whitty was allergic to them, and she died. She didn't die from them, but she died. She wasn't that old. She died. Whether the buzzards had anything to do with it, I'll just call them buzzards, because I don't know which kind they were, but I mean, she died, but she was very allergic to them. So they can cause, I know can cause health problems. And I can sympathize with you, but for some reason, I didn't feed them, so they didn't bother to come over. Plus, I didn't have watermelon and cantaloupe in the ice either. I wasn't gonna go to find nice fruit for them, but they do eat fruit. So I don't know what else, but I know that he fed them and they were on one side of the house and the woman said she couldn't deal with it anymore to move to my side. So I can't remember how long they were there, but maybe they moved. But the weird thing is they offered the people who live there where the buzzards are, offered us their house at the point of their death. I don't know if there would be anything left of the house. Do you follow me? Does anybody follow me?
Mhm.
Yes.
So I don't know that we would have, what kind of house we would have ended up with. Or whether he would have continued to feed the buzzards. I don't know what else to call them. But that's my comment. I can greatly sympathize with you. I've talked to the minister across the street, but he doesn't want to say anything, I imagine. I don't know. But I've talked to him about it and it bothers his children, so. To some extent. So I greatly sympathize with you. I was fortunate. It was the same breed, same type. I don't know whether or not it is, but I imagine it is. But being a pharmacist, I'm very aware of the health problems that can bring. And I've watched them at the police station too, and I think it's really nice when they get up on the Mercantile Center. That's really the highlight of the town, downtown, I guess, but they aren't the same type, you say. They're different. You said
No, I think it's the same type. I think it might just be a different group.
group, oh.
Yeah,
so
the same type of black vulture.
Black and,
Yeah.
well, anyway, they need to find another,
Yeah.
out in the country would be somewhere where there's.
Yeah.
I don't know what they would eat in the country, but they wouldn't be feeding them. I have heard that he went to the grocery store and got old meat. I don't know whether that's true or not. So
Yeah.
I wish we could do something to help you, I really do. I think an ordinance, we should have some sort of an ordinance.
Yeah, and some of my research with, from the Wildlife Commission, that, you know, some of the things they say is that there's enough space where we live for these animals to exist. It's when they get concentrated that you run into problems, especially concentrated in populated areas. But there is a public safety concern in that concentration, not just from disease and, you know, even the slipperiness of the excrement has become an issue for us on West Tryon Street. We've had to clean the street several times just because we don't want people slipping when it gets wet. But they also can become increasingly aggressive. Which is true about the deer in town too. The more use to humans, wildlife becomes, the more aggressive that they can become because they start becoming territorial over our yards, and buildings. And so I do think that there's, you know, true public safety concerns here. We just don't have an example of another North Carolina municipality that has an ordinance against feeding wildlife that includes birds. So we would have to have some time, I think, to work with Bob, and to just make sure that we can come up with language that accomplishes, you know, what you guys are trying to accomplish, but also, maybe exempts some other species of birds.
It's like the songbirds and stuff.
Songbirds and yeah, which I mean, to tell you the truth, like going back to the bird flu, like it is also not good to feed songbirds. I'll just get on my like, you know, sustainability director trip here for a second. It would be much better. People want to see birds in their yards for them to plant native plants than to put out bird feeders, because bird feeders actually cause a lot of the same problems that we're talking about. It's just not giant birds, so it's not quite as in your face. But certainly disease spreads more through bird feeders than it ever would through a native plant garden.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for bringing this again to our attention. It sounds like there's consensus amongst the board members about that it's a serious problem that we want staff to continue looking into. What are the appropriate solutions? It's probably a little bit more complicated as you have heard. There is no
Nothing is
ordinance to
straightforward,
go by. Stephanie, do you have what you need from us in terms of the will of the board is to, and Matt to, yes, please figure out what we can do sooner rather than later. I'm not sure there's a time limit. I know you need time to research this the way you need to do it, but do you
I
think
can get on it. I think it's important. I can get on it. I think that the wildlife guide is almost ready for you guys. It would be nice if we could have some draft ordinance language for you to look at the same time. And I think that the other component to this is once we have sort of a new policy or practice or, publications available to the public, we need to do education and outreach and teach people about it. So, it would be nice if all of that could kind of come together at the same time fairly quickly.
And can I suggest also that maybe you give Ken Ostrand a courtesy call to say that we have thoroughly discussed this, there is consensus. We're moving forward with resolving this kind of issue because it's untenable, it can't keep.
Definitely. I
Thank you.
definitely will reach out to him. Yeah, and I invited him to the meeting tonight and he may be watching online. But yeah, I will definitely reach back out to him.
Any other questions?
Ask one question.
Yes, Evan, go ahead.
You ask him to stop feeding them,
I would say on the order of 10 to 15 times then.
or did his wife do anything about it? Did you talk to her?
I don't know her opinion on the matter.
Just well, I don't know the difference. Well, I know the difference in them. And she looks after animals, at least she did look after animals that were hurt. But, I never heard them discuss, we never discussed the cultures.
Mayor,
Yes.
very short, just for the record, the board has been shared emails from other neighbors who have shared a similar story, echoing pretty much everything you've heard. So this is not the only person who's in the neighborhood who's been frustrated and experienced this.
Fourth or the fifth, probably.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for reminding us. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Okay, next up on the agenda, Marie, and we're gonna talk about the Water Sewer Advisory Committee. And Brian too.
Your background.
I called one in my support team. Did you want to say anything?
Eric, is there anything you'd like to?
Sure,
preface?
I didn't have anything written down. I just was gonna, before I toss it over to Marie, talking on the topic of the Water Sewer Advisory Committee, and I think, the board got a foreshadowing of what staff's gonna say, and, Marie's gonna share some comments from Jen Sykes, who's the chair of the Water Sewer Board. She's been on for a long time. I have a very long history of being effective and being successful. And when the board talked about this a few months ago, there was a reluctance to end the committee's tenure. And as Marie summarized, and I think a couple of board members were there at their last meeting, they feel strongly, and I think staff concurs with them, that their charge is running. I just wanted to get out front. It's like their charge is running its course, and you're going to hear an opportunity to be able to continue leveraging their skills in an ad hoc way. And I think that's fine for a period of time. I'm going to make it up and say for next year, while we have these highly trained and well-informed, knowledgeable citizens in this area, the board can call on them, staff can call on them, but not too far after that, we're gonna get to a point where if there is a major need, we can repeat what was done 24 years ago, and that's create another task force, the specific mission, let them dive into things. So I just really wanna, I know everybody feels so strongly about the positive they've done, that I do think it's time for a change and to take into heed the advice from staff and the actual WASAC members. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate your experience and your perspective.
Thank you, Eric.
Marie.
Yes, hello, everyone. The discussion about WASAC and the things that they've talked about started last year. And we brought a memo to you in August 2024 outlining some of their points to possibly slow down and eventually maybe convert to an ad hoc type committee. That memo is in your packet, repeated today. For 25 years almost, the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee has been a group of citizens represented by in-town and out-of-town people, lots of them serving as the max term, which is 8 years before they have to take a year break. Some of them have even come back after their break and served a very, very long time. I was a member of the committee, as some of you know, back in 2011 and 2012, before I left the state periodically or for a period of time. And we have covered all sorts of topics repeatedly. So when I look back through the minutes from the inception and from when I was there and from what we've talked about since I returned to the town, we've covered several important topics. The board has taken many of their recommendations. We've adjusted as things have changed, but in this past year or so, it's been rather, I don't want to say mundane, but we're running out of topics. We have run out of topics to talk to them about. They've tackled some really big ones, which is the rates, drought conditions, how we handle leak adjustments, things to do with billing. And it's just become more of an effort just to bring them in and to update them and to really not have any remaining tasks to give them. They've done such a great job. Jen Sykes, who has been the chair and is finishing her last year of her, I guess, her second term, which would be her 8th year. This year was going to be here, but she came up with a work commitment and she couldn't attend, but she did send me a statement that I will read to you. She says, the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee feels that it would better serve the public and better use town staff time being brought forward for critical issues. Most issues that appear before the committee are studied equally by the town board or consultants, so committee time is redundant. As well, most issues now have little margin for discussion and are either regulatory mandates or tie to a limited budget. So the better use of staff time is on addressing that directly instead of an added layer of review. So the suggestion, again, after talking about it further with the committee, is that they would like to disband in their current form. And the recommendation from staff is that we bring back revised code, because if you remember, we codified the committee into our town code, I think right before Margaret Health left. And so we would bring back some edits on consent agenda to sort of take that out, but to have the board decide if there is a critical water and sewer topic that requires citizen input or desires citizen input, that you all make a motion to form the committee like back in 2001 when the task force was created. There, I believe it was an ordinance or a resolution, and then it sort of outlined the topic and what they were going to tackle and how many people you wanted, what representation you wanted, and maybe handle this on a case-by-case basis. In my opinion, everything is temporary, so if we come back and we're having more routine needs, maybe we could reform a more solid committee, but for now, we're just sort of spending a lot of time for not a lot of benefit to you or the citizens, and they feel that way themselves now.
Thank you. I think we've all thoroughly discussed this issue and appreciate the back and forth that has gone on between the board and the committee and staff for all the work that you've done. So thank you. I'd like to ask Mayor Pro Tem Rob English to provide any feedback, who Rob is our representative to Wasac, and then to Matt, who was the previous representative, and we'll go around the table for additional questions to Marie.
I think we summed it up very well there. The last meeting that the last couple meetings that I've been at, I definitely sensed from the Water Sewer Advisory Council members that again, there wasn't any critical or major issues kind of that we had that needed to be researched and investigated. we feel at this time there was, you know, anything in the near future. So I sense that they just felt, their time was valuable, and that, having the committee in its current, form wasn't, the best for their time or for the staff and for, you know, for our time too. And you know, these are very committed people, very knowledgeable people, very passionate people about water and sewer. And so, you know, I'm torn because I really value their opinion and they, you know a lot more about these issues and stuff than I do. And so I, you know, again, really appreciate, you know, their willingness to share their expertise. But at the same time, I felt that, you know, that I understand where they're coming from. And so, you know, as much as I would love to, you know, to have those folks available, at the same time, I completely understand that they just don't feel it's necessary at this time. So you know, I'm fine with disbanding this and in its current form, knowing that if we did have a critical need in the future, that we would be able to again reform a committee. I think with people with a similar expertise and not the same in our community.
Great, thank you, Ron. Matt?
Yeah, I actually appreciated the idea of designating one of us to always be that person to go to the meetings. And making it the mayor pro tem. I happen to be that person that year, and for those 2 years. And what I noticed from the fact that the committee was meeting monthly, and then it became every other month, a lot of discussion amongst members about, you know, important topics seem to circle back to the same topics, over and over, or running into those blocks. And I feel like having one person to go to all the meetings, you got so much more of a holistic sense of what the committee was discussing and that sort of thing, in a way that I don't think we got previously, because we would go to 2 meetings, sometimes not even consecutive meetings, you know, twice a year, basically, for most of the time I've been on the board. And I really did, and I think I may have told you this, Mayor Bill, I really didn't see the need for WSAC, because the discussions were very circular, but then also the members themselves were saying, you know, I'm not sure how much impact we have, or not impact in terms of their service on WSAC, but to the points that Marie alluded to about regulatory issues and budget issues and balanced budgets and that sort of thing, that it really ends up, I think they realize their hands were even more tied than ours were in a lot of ways. And so, you know, I would be in favor of disbanding. You know, when they were like, maybe we could do an ad hoc or that sort of thing, you know, I kind of pulled back from it. But seeing that they themselves have taken the step to ask to be disbanded, and then also looking at Chapel Hill recently and how they disbanded, I think, 8 advisory boards, some of which I actually was kind of surprised about, one I think was in your department, with Parks and Rec. So, you know, and that was the thing that came up, is staff time. Is there enough of a charter for the groups? Are you getting the participation from the groups? And so that kind of made me think a little differently about it. I guess the only question I have, and this might be a Marie question, it might be a Bob question, is how do we disband an advisory committee? Can we do that with a date in mind, since they want to be able to meet in February, or do we wait for the ordinance to come through?
You can
do an ordinance disbanding them as of February 28th or something. I mean, that's one way to handle it. It doesn't have to be an immediately effective ordinance.
Okay. So we could do that in February. I don't know if that's, I mean, I'm sure it's strike through.
I'm throwing February out there just as, placeholder in terms of making it effective as a certain date.
Yeah, cause the next scheduled meeting wouldn't be until April. So we've got some time.
It would be a simple ordinance.
Yeah, I would assume it'd be mostly strike through and
Right.
some other stuff.
Right.
Clean up references and that kind of thing.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate your experience and your perspective. Evelyn, do you have any questions for Marie, and do you agree with what the recommendation is?
Pardon me, I shouldn't have eaten this. I can remember, I can remember you being on the board. I remember the man whose name I should remember because he's been on so many boards.
Dan Barker, I believe you're speaking about Dan Barker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember you two were very active, and there was some who never said anything. There was the woman, Jacqueline, who was very vocal. And she had a degree in biochemistry or something. And it was interesting, and Julie Laws was, at one point was there. It was interesting. I think you had more topics then than you do now. I think now you've got a staff, you got a bigger staff. And just, I think you're handling it very well.
We've addressed
And
a
I
lot
would
of,
say-
a
I
lot
would
of
say
things.
Just put it on the ad hoc. If you need them, you need them, and I do appreciate all that they've done. Because I think Dan Barker's been on there 2 or 3 times. As often as he can be in the planning board and everything else.
He ended up moving out of our area, which is why he resigned. But we did miss him. We did miss him.
Evelyn, are you in favor of the recommendation?
Yes. Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Kathleen?
No, I am in favor of the recommendation. I have found them very valuable. There, again, like Rob, their knowledge exceeds mine, and I greatly appreciate the thoroughness, the expertise, well thought out. I think they've been just extraordinary, and their communication with the rest of the community has been invaluable. I mean, that I think they can't be underestimated. Very grateful. I appreciate that we're wanting to respect their time and wanting, is part of that respect is their understanding and feeling of being wanted, needing, and contributing. And so with that in mind, I'm supporting the recommendation.
Megan?
Excuse me. I also am supporting the recommendation of disband the committee as is and changing it to ad hoc. Many of the same reasons my fellow commissioners mentioned. Their time is very valuable and they have done a lot for the town and they've brought a lot of good, good thoughts behind what they've talked about. But it is important to respect their time and their expertise. And right now, I don't think them coming together just to come together is not a good way to use their time, so.
Thank you. Well, Marie, it sounds like there's a consensus how to proceed on that, and so the question would be, Bob, can we have something ready for the next meeting to adopt on a consent agenda?
I think the February meeting, yeah.
I could maybe even do it on consent for the workshop, see how things go, but yes,
Right.
like, within the next 2 meetings, I can bring back a revised ordinance that sort of changes their function. Now, some of them, perhaps all of them, they don't plan to be, if you call someone in 7 months, probably will not be that same group of people. And I did want to add, based on what a few of you have said, one, I think, given their long-term experience with this board, they will continue to be vocal in educating the public when they see something that's incorrect on social media. We always have the opportunity for citizens to come in and state their thoughts on certain water and sewer things, which will help guide you in whether an ad hoc committee will need to be formed. And I also wanted to highlight that we have had trouble in the past few years getting members. And I think having an ad hoc committee that's a temporary commitment instead of a 4-year commitment like the members were on the committee would attract a wider representation of our water customers as well.
Well, thank you. We look forward to your recommendations, and maybe Rob has a question.
It's fun to think about this, because I would like to find a way that we can recognize those current members before, we disband them. And
Yes.
so I don't know how to do that, but if you have any ideas, whatever, let us know. So I certainly would like to recognize them in the form.
Did we do that at the February meeting?
Common way the boards do that is through a resolution. You can adopt a resolution with language articulating some of the things that has been discussed here recently. So you can take a stab at that.
I had mine in a beautifully bound binder when I left. You all were very kind to recognize my service, so we can do that. And also, I am recommending that they have one more meeting. They have some minutes to adopt, and I did want to do some type of recognition for them, not just say, goodbye, you're disbanded, but spend some time and reflect over everything that they've helped do for the town. And hopefully they will come back if the ad hoc is recommended in the future, but.
Okay, thank you. We
Thank
look
you.
forward to bringing that back to us. Okay. Next up, the draft legislative goals and designation of a voting member to the lead to present our draft top 10 legislative priorities to.
And I've noticed that the redlined version does not include my comments. I had added comments to the red lines that were there.
But
I know
that's-
Eric, you did?
That's because the agenda went out before you guys got me the comments. So I had emailed, and I just sit there thought,
Yeah.
I emailed those back out to everybody, but I should have made a hard copy for everybody.
So what we did is we got all the comments. I synthesized all those, and the good news is that there are about 3 that we should talk about. The others, everybody agrees to. And so let me just quickly bring up my spreadsheet. It was a little complicated. There were 16 and there were 5 of us, and plus the original comments from Eric and myself earlier. So I'll just kind of putting that into a way that I could easily manage, keeping track of were we in agreement and where are we not. It was a little tricky. So give me just a second to pull that up. Okay, so there are 3 that we do not have consensus on. And the first one is number 5. Okay, expand expand incentives and funding for local economic development. And, Kathleen has, one opinion. And then I have a similar opinion. And then I think, Eric, the starting point for your comments on this, maybe was taking into account that economic incentive, how difficult it would be to have broad opinion on how to be able to have economic incentives. And I was thinking more small scale. It'd be nice if the state gave each municipality a small bucket of money to spend on economic development that was best for our local municipality, not in sync with, anybody else. So I didn't want us to exclude that as a possibility that the legislature might somehow fund block grants, so to speak, to municipalities for economic development. And Kathleen said, it's Kathleen.
Mine is more like, and this, my comment is that, essentially, we can say no incentives and competition. The site selection world is very small. And our residents, without the incentives, our residents suffer because those jobs goes elsewhere. And I completely agree with the sentiment that it's bidding competition, it is overpayment, it's corporate welfare, it is a horrible system. And we don't have the leverage to change the game. If we had leverage to change the game, I would be all over it. But without the leverage to change the game, without those incentives, the projects that North Carolina has wanted, and I'll use the automotive as an example. We get VinFast and while everyone else got Toyota, the Mercedes, and all of those ancillary supplier business that have to be within an hour and a half of those plants. It's game changing for regionally, and we will be out of the running, and we will have by saying no, we are morally right, and we won't have those jobs in those communities, especially the rural, which it needs it, will be out. So that's my thinking.
Okay, so I think we have two different perspectives on that. I wasn't even thinking about incentives to lure people to come bring their companies.
I mean, I would
That was
love,
not even on my radar. So,
and I would love, because I agree also, we need to have more tools in the toolbox for our own local, for a variety of economic development and what fits, but at the state level, which is this is applicable, that's the playing field that it'll get interpreted.
yeah. So does this conversation resonate with anybody? Does it change the vote? I don't get to vote on that. But is it worth additional conversation to reconsider including?
Well, I think that, hearing Commissioner Ferguson's idea, I think definitely opens my mind up, but then, and I, globally, or at least statewide agree, but in terms of Hillsborough, I struggled even being on the committee that came up with the 16 priorities, that even if we had the ability to expand incentives and short of, a block grant from the state or that sort of thing, I really feel like, we don't have the capacity to incentivize under existing law. I could be wrong about that, looking at our manager. Because I think that the only thing that we could do are things that we have the ability, that we have been doing, because we have a small budget and a lot of that budget isn't applicable. I think that the biggest thing for us when it comes to our local economic development is getting our water and sewer infrastructure up to speed and upgraded. I don't see us having the ability to even meaningfully contribute in terms of incentives that even if the funding options were expanded, maybe that's through sales tax or, you know, a special sales tax or something like that, that, you know, it's not going to, it's just like the affordable housing issue that we've been talking about. I don't think there's enough there for us to have the impact in Hillsborough itself. And the type of incentives that we could provide for economic development. So, statewide, I agree, but in terms of Hillsborough, I'm not moved that that should be one of our local priorities.
I'm confused. I thought we were talking about the league, nearing it, the league, that is to apply statewide.
Right, but I'm saying for us,
As opposed to, so when we're reducing the 16 to 10, those are the 10 priorities the league should focus on. When the league focuses on, they're focusing on statewide, not just Hillsborough. And then our legislative priorities, my understanding is different because that is what we want to focus on, whether we are lobbying individually, we hire lobbyists, we tap on with other lobbyists, however we approach that. But I see those as completely different things because the league is not going to be focusing on Hillsborough. It's whatever is applicable statewide.
I think I can add some additional context to that question. I understand your question.
So my comments are within the context of the league advocating on the legislature, whatever they're advocating is effective, is intent, it's not local bills. In other words, so if it were a local bill, like I said, if it was just Hillsborough, I totally agree, but if I want to make sure, we're,
Hillsborough versus what is best for the state.
yes, and what we're deciding here.
So
'cause I'm
it's a little bit in between because I contacted the league to ask some clarifying questions. And the answer is, we are free to make any recommendations we want. We don't have to stick to these 16. We don't have to even do 10.
Oh, yeah,
So I think with that knowledge, I think what we say is a priority. We might come up with something that is very Hillsborough specific, or it may or may not apply to any of the other, you know, hundreds of municipalities in the state. But they want to get as much input from as many municipalities as possible so they can synthesize that into their
okay.
priorities. So I think we have the flexibility to,
No, I know we've always had the flexibility. It's a matter of, again, I've got my, you know, they're gonna be lobbying for the state, not a local bill.
Correct.
And,
and moreover, there's additional time. If we want to update our local Hillsborough priorities, which Eric gave us that document as well, we are free to do that, but that's not
It's not
associated
this.
with the deadline for today's.
exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so Matt, can I ask you a clarifying question? Do you see this priority as it says expanded incentives and funding for local economic development? And just kind of the gist of the conversation I'm hearing, it's about incentives, not funding. For example, in our strategic plan, comprehensive sustainability plan, one of the things we have to do this year is to do a local workforce development needs assessment. If somebody gave us $100,000 grant so we could hire a company to do a really good job informing us, I would say yes. That's my idea. I would love for the state to fund that statewide. That's awesome. But based on the conversation, it's not that kind of funding that I'm hearing. Is that an appropriate use for? Or do I just give up trying to persuade?
you know, and I'm looking back at what the league said, for that, and I mean, I see it to some extent, and then, of course, you know, the examples that they give, whether it's film tax credits, industrial site development, downtown development, renewable energy tax credits, you know, those are things that I would, you know, I think that the incentives, I think it's the incentives and funding and the various ways they're linked together. And, you know, my thought is that for a town like Hillsborough, because I'm, you know, I think of it as us going to bat for the things that we think is important to impact our operations. I don't see this really applying to us, and even if it's not a local bill, I wasn't referring to a local bill earlier, I was referring to just legislation in general. I just don't think we benefit a lot from it here in Hillsborough and being in Orange County. I see these sorts of incentives, if they're given to all the municipalities, as being something that's like, oh, that would be nicer if we had a bigger budget. And the funding, I just feel like, you know, just being in Orange County wouldn't necessarily be funded. So, kind of how I follow that.
Thank you. Okay, so Kathleen, what are your thoughts? You're the only one who disagrees.
Yeah,
or
well,
disagrees.
yeah, because I'm thinking about, for example, the steel building, which is up for sale. The old steel building, now that they've moved to Mebane, that's an example of industrial that whoever's gonna be coming in, depending on who it is, it's absolutely gonna be wanting incentives. I would love to have state kicking into that, then, we don't have that kind of funding to kick in. And I happen to know, some of the condition of the building and whatever, and I just look at, we've got some, we have limited opportunity for where incentives come into play. But where we do have, whether it's Winmore, and thank God they're here, don't want them to go, or, oh, words just left me, Eurosport, Desert Harvest, or, we actually have a number of companies that, depending on how they play, they would be normally the candidates for that kind of thing. And they're, those site selection, it's national.
Yeah.
And so it's just, like I said, that's,
You make your point well.
yeah.
I understand. So what's the consensus of the board? Does anybody want, the argument is to Kathleen would like to have it remain as one of the top 10 priorities. She's the only one advocating for that. Anybody?
It's not top 10 for me.
Not top 10, man? No, Megan?
Not in this regard, thinking of it this way.
Evelyn, do you think this number 5 should be a priority or not? No?
No, I don't think it, no, I don't think it should be a priority.
We're ready to move on?
Yeah, we can move on. I will just respectfully disagree.
All right, and on the next one is number 6, and Kathleen made some suggested changes that seem to be in keeping with everything we've discussed in the past.
And I want to
That is,
clarify, because my big fear, and again, I'm looking at state level, the way it's being interpreted as incentives is on that development side, which is removing regulations, removing environmental, and my concern are more environmental, water, sewer, resource. And not, short-term affordability, the LIHTC.
Right.
And for especially rural, and again, I'm thinking statewide, and certainly towns of we're not alone, small towns just like us, we need more funding options.
So the suggestion is to reword this, which is fine, we can do that. To create more funding options to encourage the development of diverse, long-term affordability of housing options.
It needs to be better wording, but it's more diverse, long-term affordable housing options.
Affordable. Okay.
My bad.
You want to take the incentives out of it, that incentive?
I'm okay. I'm okay with incentives, but I'm just very conscious how it's being interpreted. And incentives, and especially those environmental, we've already seen the energy. go down. We've seen the handyman go up where there's no regulation of those folks, 40,000. This is not helping. So I'm a little wary of the words incentive in this particular context because of I've seen it going in a direction that I worry about our folks.
And it does seem like the incentive really is the funding. They're almost interchangeable. Yeah, any additional changes or disagreement on rewording number 6?
Well. Yes,
Okay,
only in the sense that I think that incentives often are conflated with funding. But I think we also have to acknowledge that you can have a regulatory environment in which there is a disincentive to building housing, whether it's affordable housing or market rate. And so I think having it to where it's create more funding options, I think is good, but there's a lot of I think barriers to building even market rate housing. And so what I would be concerned about is just having the diverse housing options is not just the funding element to it. I do think there is a regulatory element to it. And so I think that keeping as is and adding, create incentives and more funding options to encourage diverse housing options. But, I think there's just also that group of folks that are looking for affordable, just market rate, and there's no funding for that. But there could be some additional incentives to getting those types of units online as well.
I get your meaning and maybe,
I'm okay with that. I hear what you're saying. In terms of. I'm not, this is one it's like I can go with. I'm queasy about because I'm seeing. Where it's happening, it's more sprawl. It's,
I think I have a suggestion that might make you
Okay.
both happy. Create more incentives and funding options to encourage the development of diverse and long-term affordable housing options.
that works.
Boom,
That's inclusive.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
You get the gold star. Good job.
Okay, and the last one, is, number 9, reduce regulatory conflicts between the state agencies that, discourage voluntary. Sorry, the font is too small. Consolidation, merger, and interconnection of municipal utility systems.
My comment was really towards 8, not 9.
Can you go back?
8 is to create incentives that encourage and adequately fund regionalized water and sewer solutions. I get queasy over that because I see that, 3/4 of the state of Atlanta, because it's uncontrolled growth and without regard to water resources.
I'm sorry, the way I read your comments, you struck through, number
Yeah.
9, even though everybody,
Oh, I didn't strike through 9, I struck through 8.
So that's supposed to be okay.
Struck through.
Your 9 is supposed to be like number 8 then.
Yeah, I had struck through 8. And then
Good
my
start on
comment,
mine.
and then on 9, I had the comment of, again, that consolidation leads to growth. Eliminating the consolidation,
But you struck through,
8.
8 was originally.
Oh, was it? Okay.
that was,
Yeah, it was already.
Oh, that's
okay,
right.
all right.
Never mind. But I did have that comment on consolidation. Regionalization, I am worried about.
9. Okay, so Kathleen, what is your opinion? I'm looking at your comments on number 9.
It's that the consolidation, where I get concerned is on the consolidation side. What I see happening is all that does is fuel growth without regard to water resource.
So it's just an additional comment because there are no blue comments on number 9, correct?
There's no Eric, I don't think there's any Eric comments under.
My comment was just eliminating
Okay,
consolidation.
Thank you.
I mean, the mergers and interconnection of municipal utility systems, I mean, I think that one thing, and that's a slippery slope, even in that interconnection, but at least there's more control.
Okay, so you agree to keep it off the list of
8,
Yeah.
keep it off the list, and
And you want to take voluntary consolidation out of 9? Is that what you're
and
saying?
9 is.
hang on one second, let me, we're in 8, and then now I'm on to number 9. Sorry, I have to open up, multiple documents. Okay, so on number 9, Kathleen,
Removing voluntary consolidation. Leaving in merger and interconnection.
So leave in merger.
Leave in merger.
Okay. I can go with that.
okay, so how should number 9 read from your perspective, Kathleen?
I would say that discourage merger and interconnection of municipal utility systems.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand what it is
So
you want to strike.
striking voluntary consolidation.
Yeah, so strike those 2 words.
Correct.
Then. Yeah. And Megan, you had comments on that one as well? Are you okay with the tweaking or do you want to see?
I guess I'm fine with the tweaking. My overall part of this was that as it relates to Hillsborough, we wouldn't see any merger or consolidation with any of our neighbors. So why is it? part
Not
of our-
necessarily with what is been discussed, at least when I've been in leadership. It's a matter of time before they allow the interbasin.
I mean, that's, I guess, what was my overall question was, is it so unfeasible for Hillsborough to connect with Durham or Mebane that even if they say, we'll release everything, make it super easy to build and super easy to do these things,
We
like,
have-
would we never do it still because it's just doesn't make.
Well,
It's not
we're
feasible.
close enough to Alamance that with regionalization, Paw River and some of those, I would hope not, but we're close enough that, and I'm thinking longer term. I'm a little queasy, and especially as long as that Alamance has a different growth priority.
When Mebane reaches Hillsborough, is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
But I'm okay with leaving this on if it is feasible that we would connect with these, but there is a cost point where it doesn't make sense for us to connect to anyone either.
Oh,
So, I mean, that was my overall question, like if it's costs so much and there's so many hills and valleys and pumps and size that it just doesn't make sense for us to connect to anybody, then why would it be on? That was my question.
Okay, so to conclude then on number 9, we're just gonna take out voluntary consolidation and then everybody's okay with that. Okay, we're in agreement on all of those things. So the next step then is to select someone to be our voting person, and then that process is gonna be underway in a few days. Kathleen, you've been the voting person?
I have
Okay.
been.
How long have you done that?
I've been that for, well, since the beginning we got involved. I was gonna say with me rolling off the legislative committee and Matt rolling on, I would say that would be appropriate for him unless you don't want to. I mean,
Is it like You just gotta log in and go in and vote.
You have to be at, well, yeah, this one, yeah, you just log in and
Yeah.
vote. It's that simple. I mean,
And then we have City Vision,
in City
but
Vision
that's
where,
different.
where you have to be there in person and
Yeah.
do your sign, literally.
Do you know when City Vision is
Yeah.
this year?
Yeah, April 20.
Okay, it's April, okay.
Yeah,
I feel like 1 year was in March.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Matt, it's okay for you to be on the committee that devised these and to be the voting member, is that cool?
yeah, it's been, that's the way it's been in the past. It makes sense.
Any objection? Anybody else want to do it?
City Vision's the 29th.
oh, that's
Okay.
Okay, so I think we're ready for a motion to accept the modified priorities and then to designate Matt as the voting member.
All right, I move to accept the modified, thank you. Modified priorities and to make Matt Hillsborough's representative to vote.
Second.
Thank you, Rob. Who was the second? Kathleen, thank you.
Oh,
Kathleen.
That's
Was it?
okay.
Who, Evelyn?
I seconded it, but that's okay. If
Okay.
Kathleen wants to, that's fine.
Well, you got,
She
we'll give it to Evelyn.
yeah, give it.
So, additional, any more discussion, and that is, I will provide the,
I was gonna say, I need
tweet
the-
back to
the
you. I've been
tweet.
taking notes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll do it tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah, but it is, you log in, do your thing, easy peasy.
I'll send it to the board and staff as well. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. Okay, item D, discussion of possible topics for the February 17th joint meeting with Orange County. Staff have provided a few things and also some ideas from Travis at the county. Has everybody had a chance to read those, and do you any objections, or do you have any additional topics you would like to have?
At what point are we gonna talk to the county about the use of the downtown buildings?
We can put it on the list.
I would like, I think we need to.
Do you want to put some guardrails? That's a big, broad
It
topic.
is, but when they, with the new facilities that are being built. Haven't heard if they've even started discussions about repurposing those buildings or redevelopment or anything like
The
that.
facility plan contains all that information from year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago.
I don't remember that the county had made decisions, and I don't remember that they consulted. We even had any input with our downtown,
No, not that they know.
and that's,
There, I'm struggling, I don't recall exactly, but it was advertised. And, I think that process was concluded at least a year and a half ago.
It was done before the schools were done.
I don't particularly want to go there. I don't particularly want to go there because I'm afraid of what they want to put there.
that's what I'm afraid too, and it's like it's our down.
Oh, what are you specifically talking?
The old jail space.
Yes, they're reserving that for additional future capacity for the court system.
Okay, I mean, it's just.
Yeah, the one that,
Matt, I see Matt is raising his hand. Matt?
So, we can share the adoptive facilities plan. Shannon, Margaret, and I all served on the staff working group, for the county's facilities plan, provided input from the town's perspective, and I'm happy to provide a link to their adoptive. plan.
Thank you.
What is it?
That they, they put in, I'm gonna butcher it.
Shannon and Margaret and I were all part of the staff group together, the facilities plan for the county, and I'll share what they've adopted, with this board.
And so you told us,
Yes, it was when Margaret was still here, and we're finishing that up.
okay, well, whatever they want to do, they'll do anyway. So.
Well, I'll send you all a link to the adoptive.
It's
plan.
just like I want the cupola painted, and they said that was about 2 years away. And I said the clock was, it only cost X number of dollars. I wanted to cover like the cupola painted soon. And they said they could see what they could do, and you helped with that too.
Yeah,
They
I'll
still
get that.
haven't painted, but the clock does strike on the island.
I'll get the plan sent to y'all.
Don't think I don't waste that clock. Oh, thank you. I wondered what it covers my head, instead of me to shut.
No.
I'm waiting for the manager to come with his report.
Kathleen, does that help to
Yeah,
answer
yeah,
your
yeah,
question?
yeah,
Okay, are there any other suggested topics that we talk about? It looks like it'd be that's at least 2.5 hours of discussion.
Yeah.
There.
Might be the right Ken.
No, I'm curious about this potential for county financial and other participation in town projects like parks and recreation amenity agreements. And that's stuff to the left, but do you know what, are we asking them to help us fund maintenance on our existing, or is that for future?
I think the idea that staff suggested having the conversation about is for both maintenance and development of new parks and recreation facilities in the future. Many of our parks are loved by folks who do not live and contribute to the tax base in town, and all of our residents are county taxpaying residents as well.
Yeah.
And so I think the concept was just sort of testing the waters of, is there a partnership opportunity in the future?
Yeah, I love that idea. I just, know that Carrboro and Chapel Hill would, I think be very interested in a similar agreement too, and I just don't see that as. I just don't see that, because they also have their own, they don't really greenways, but they have their own parks in the county, but I think their argument would be, yes, it's all part of the county. I just don't, I'm not opposed to it, but I just, I don't see how they would ever do that.
And I think Mark Kleinschmidt had raised that issue. I have memories of him raising that specific issue with the VOCC at that time, and it got shot down. But having said that, I think we need to it's a different group, and
I think something like Fairview, that's kind of like in our town, but also, the island of the county. Would be more beneficial to us in terms of how can we work together to help develop more in Fairview.
I think that might be the genesis of the idea, because as you know,
Yes, and
the Dot Johnson Center is in the town, but the little pocket park beside it, and the playground equipment is in the county.
Yeah.
And that's,
and they're just hearing some feedback from them, from Fairview community specifically about, how their youth in action really wanted to see some sort of soccer field, but the county, it's like, nope, these are gonna be pickleball or tennis court expansion, and
yeah, I think that's exactly what we need to, because I was gonna raise that, because to your point, the Fairview community is a major component and the only place for some of those residents, and the plans for the park don't reflect what that community has been asking for years.
well, it sounds like this is a great opportunity for us to express our opinions and help support.
I'm sorry for you to get off that tangent there, but, thank you, Matt, for explaining that.
Well, and on that, I think to Rob's point of being more specific about something like Fairview Park, I think that an extension of that would be, going ahead and floating some, potential assistance when it comes to something like Bridge Walk, because to me, that's not just about, a park facility in town. It's also part of a multimodal plan. It's also part of, things that ultimately will also serve the county in its various properties in town. I'm thinking about people who need to use social services and need to find a safe way to get to, not Hampton Point, but I only know how to say is the old Walmart. But, to get over to Mayo Street, that also is connectivity for people to go vote, when early voting is occurring. That's getting people to the train station and other things that, the county ultimately is benefiting from as well. And so I would be interested in seeing, what kind of partnerships there are, related to that, because I think the only other time that I can think of about the county being really involved in any sort of greenway planning, I believe is, there's been discussion about the rail line that goes to the coaching facility at UNC and turning that into a trail. With Chapel Hill and Carrboro participating in that in the county as well. And so, that discussion is occurring or has occurred or continues to occur. Then I think something similar with Ridgewalk makes a lot of sense. And the termini for both of those wouldn't be terribly different or terribly far from each other.
The fact that we're having a Hillsborough specific meeting with Orange County really is the opportunity for us to help make those points. Matt?
So Commissioner Hughes, you brought up a point that, we probably should have put on this recommendation. Speaking of the train station, so in the development plans for the Hillsborough Station transit-oriented development, there are a number of opportunities and options for partnership, with the county on transportation and civic related uses. We haven't really had a chance to discuss that in depth with you all. The county board, I don't know, is aware of some of the proposals, but at a staff level, these conversations are happening. And so that may be a suggested topic that could be a good use of that time.
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you. Okay. Matt and Eric, do you have good feedback, enough feedback to continue negotiating with the county on?
I think so. I want to think out loud for a second. So I think the timing of the county, I need to by tomorrow morning, send something to the county manager, do a cut and paste, whatever, changes. So on the discussion we just had about parks, I guess I'm not sure how to phrase. I think we're going to more likely to have a productive discussion and credit Commissioner English for raising Carrboro, and I understand the county's position, we need to have a specific and unique topic to discuss, which could be Fairview Park, it could be Ridgewalk. So the question for the board is do we have enough time to frame that before that? I don't know, the Ridgewalk, I mean, I guess we could raise that as a concept. If, Matt, you guys could blend that in with the multimodal facility with Ridgewalk. Do we have enough information to talk about Fairview?
For the meeting, yes, for tomorrow morning.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's fine. So I can just mention Fairview specifically.
Yeah, because I mean, as the commissioners have mentioned, there are elements of the Activate plan that the community has endorsed that we can point to and identify.
All right, so I'll modify that to specifically mention Fairview Park. All right, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to hot topics for January 27th workshop. Anything on the radar?
The only thing that I'm aware of is the presentation that utility staff, planning staff, and Matt are coordinating update on connecting the land use plan with utility capacity and water and sewer. They actually did a dry run today during our finance and budget meeting to make final tweaks and everything. So that'll be a big discussion topic and very important. And I believe we're also going to let the Chamber of Commerce know. And I had a real estate agent just asked me the other day, hey, what's up with water and sewer capacity? I said, please either attend or watch the YouTube video on the 27th. There'll be lots of helpful information.
Good. Thank you. Okay, updates. Board members, Evelyn, do you have any updates?
We didn't meet in December.
Definitely.
Yeah, my meetings are coming up this week and next week, so then I will.
Same with me. I haven't had one.
Same here. I've had a couple of meetings that are not, board assignments that are, relevant, but not essential.
No update.
Very similar. Visitors Bureau is next week, I believe, and last Friday I attended the DEI kickoff with a few of y'all. But those are updates.
Good, thank you. Eric, anything to add?
Nope.
Okay, staff reports, the agenda. We are ready to move to closed session. Do we have a motion?
Motion to move to closed session.
Second.
Thank you, Rob. Kathleen, second. Okay, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Great. We'll take a little 5-minute break and then. Close the line.